Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. Director, Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, U.S. Department of the Treasury, Donna Gambrell. Executive Director, the Democracy Collaborative, Ted Howard. President and CEO, Calvert Foundation, Lisa Hall. Chairman, the Boston Beer Company, Inc., Jim Koch. And our moderator, SK and Angela Chan, Professor of Global Management, Haas School of Business, University of California, Berkeley, Laura Dandria Tyson.
Good morning, everyone. That was a wonderful dynamic duo, and it leads really right into our conversation, because our conversation is about sustainable finance. We heard from the importance of small business to jobs. Small businesses need to be financed. This is about financing, and it's about financing particularly of small business and doing it in a sustainable way. And the focus here really is, what are the source of the funds? What are the partnerships? What are the forms in which the funds are made available? Loans, equity, seed money? How exactly does the money get made available? How do you choose the businesses to invest in? Small businesses, one of the reasons that traditional markets often do not work with small business, it's very hard, costly to identify the small business opportunity. So how do you identify? We heard also about complementary assets in the last panel. That is, it's not just the money for the small business, it's the money, it's the talent, it's the strategic vision, it's the mentorship. So what kinds of additional support do institutions provide to small businesses? I also heard in the last session, very, very important, the role of technology. So there's a huge amount going on, and I'm sure in this room there are lots of people doing it. Innovation in how you find people to invest, how you find people to invest in, how you monitor or measure the performance of an investment. Technology is allowing massive changes in that in this sector as well. So what I've asked the panelists to do is we all got the same set of suggestions to make this very action-oriented and to make it very example-oriented. Each of these great leaders are handling the issue of providing sustainable finance to small business in different ways. And so we will talk about examples and interact to try to see what we can learn from each other in different ways of doing that. So I'm going to start with Donna, and of course the CDFI fund is a major source of funds for many of the activities. So we found out just in the discussion beforehand, there are lots of linkages in this panel in terms of working together. So Donna, why don't you start with how CDFI works and provides funding into sustainable finance.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Good morning, everyone. If I had to use 3 words, it would be invest in CDFIs, because that's what the CDFI fund does.
All right.
And I couldn't give, I'd have to give proper respect to President Clinton, because he was the one that had the vision to start the CDFI fund. Back in 1993, as part of a campaign promise, he had this vision that he was going to create 100 community development financial institutions located in low-income communities across the country, and they would serve those communities that were not being served by traditional financial institutions. And so fast forward, 18 years later, here we have a core group of community development financial institutions that started out with just a few hundred. There are now nearly 1,000 CDFIs across the country in every state of the union. And I always say, Laura, that I have the best job in government because I get a chance to be at the helm of an organization that funds these certified CDFIs. Basically, what we do is to certify those community development financial institutions. They are demonstrating that as their primary purpose, they are promoting community and economic development in underserved markets in the country. And so through that certification, they are able to qualify for our awards programs. We provided $1.4 billion in awards over the last 18 years. over $36 billion in new markets tax credit allocations. And with that, these CDFIs, with this extraordinary mission, have been able to finance affordable housing, small businesses, community facilities, healthcare facilities, schools, and they do it in a way that is safe and sound and sustainable in those communities.
And can I just ask a follow-up question so everyone understands? When you give a fund, when you fund one of these, what is the nature of the funding? Is it a multi-year funding, a single grant? How do you continue funding? How do you make these organizations sustainable over time?
So each year, organizations, the CDFIs, come to us as part of our awards process.
Okay.
And we actually don't fund projects or individuals. We fund those CDFIs' business plans. They come with a very holistic proposal on how they'll meet the needs of those underserved communities. And we actually rank and score them, and the winners, if you will, actually get funding from us.
And is this one other thing, because this is a year where we focus on large budgetary decisions, how is the funding of your organization? How does Treasury fund this? Are these annual appropriations?
These are annual appropriations, and I must say we have done very well. We have broad bipartisan congressional support.
Fantastic.
Because most people understand the impact that's actually occurring in their communities. We also have strong support from the Obama administration as well.
Fantastic.
So we've done very well.
And one final one, just because we had Karen Mills right before, and Karen indicated backstage that you all are now working with the SBA. So this is an important new development.
Correct. And, one of the things, people always say government has created these tremendous silos, and we don't always work across government, and I think we do, and we've been making great strides. Karen Mills is a fantastic leader. One of her programs is a pilot program under SBA called Community Advantage, and for the first time, CDFIs that are loan funds are able to take advantage of that small business program so that they are actually doing the kind of lending that we need to do in our communities.
So it's basically the partnership idea, is a partnership in government, a partnership with banks, because
Correct.
the banks are working with the SBA, a partnership with the community development financial
Exactly.
institutions. It's fantastic. I think Karen's tagline for this, which I love, is more doors, more dollars. And you're a door to many other doors. So now let's move to another door here, and that's Ted. One of the great pleasures I had preparing for this, honestly, was to read and learn about Evergreen. So I want to point out again, these institutions all have unique ways of dealing with who are the partners, how do we find the investments, and what do we supply to the organization to help it succeed? And Evergreen has some amazing ways of doing that.
Right. Thank you, Laura. First, hello, everybody from the great city of Cleveland, Ohio.
Not far.
I just moved there, so I can promote it. Mrs. Clinton very famously years ago wrote a book called It Takes a Village, to raise a child. And if you're interested in creating jobs and wealth-building opportunities in the country's lowest income neighborhoods, it takes an entire city. It's an all-hands-on-deck effort because the people who live in those communities don't have themselves access to the capital and some of the wherewithal to build their own businesses. They need partners. And so in Cleveland, we're working in 6 neighborhoods that have 43,000 residents, 40% of whom live below the poverty line. And a lot of other people are not in all that great shape. And we decided we'd do a bootstrapping operation. We would leverage the assets of Cleveland, Ohio, to support our city in rebuilding its economy. And the assets we have are not so much the business community. Much of that has left because we lost our manufacturing base. It's the large anchor institutions that are place-based, the Cleveland Clinic, university hospitals, Case Western Reserve University. So with the leadership of the Cleveland Foundation, the oldest community foundation in the country, and our mayor, Frank Jackson, in his city, we started something called the Evergreen Cooperative Initiative. And basically, as I said, it's a bootstrapping operation with 3 goals. 1, to create jobs in the inner city for people who've been excluded from that opportunity. 2nd, to build wealth for those people. And 3rd, to stabilize the place. Evergreen has 3 legs to the stool. We work with our large anchor institutions, the eds and meds, that can't leave our community. They're going to be there in 100 years. So they're accountable, reliable customers. We look with them at how to reform their supply chain to drive business locally and create new businesses and employ people. Second, we're organizing businesses as cooperatives. By the way, this is the International Year of the Cooperative declared by the United Nations. And we're creating worker-owned cooperatives based in the community, employing people from low-income census tracts who become the owners of these businesses. And third, our businesses are green. If you compare an evergreen business to a competitor in our market, we are by far the greenest. Right now, we have 3 companies out the gate, and just to tell you about one that's being built right now, it's the Green City Growers. It's the largest food production greenhouse in an urban core area in America. With the city's help, we've assembled 10 acres of land. We're building on it an almost 4-acre greenhouse that every year will produce 3 million heads of lettuce and 300,000 pounds of basil and other herbs for the local market. And it will be owned by the 43 people from the neighborhood who are the workers there. And finally, I'd just like to introduce you a moment to one of our workers. His name's Medrick Addison. He's the second person we hired. He works at the Evergreen Cooperative Laundry. Medrick, like many of the people we've hired, is an ex-offender. You know what that means. He's been in jail. As Medrick says, it's not very politically correct, but Medrick says, I'm an ex-con. We hired Medrick because no one else would give him a job. And I asked Medrick recently, what does it mean to you to work in an evergreen company where you're an owner? And he said 3 things I think are really profound. First, he said, I never thought a person like me, who had made the mistakes I did in life, could ever own a corporation. Second, he said, maybe with Evergreen, things that I had concluded would never be possible in my life, like sending my kids to college, might now be available to me. And the third thing he said with a big smile on his face was, Ted, owning your own job is a beautiful thing.
That is fantastic. Let me ask about you talked about the anchor institutions in terms of procurement, buyers, really. These are the institutions that are going to buy the products and services. What about the funds? So you're lending. Are you getting money from CDFI fund? Are you getting money from those anchor institutions, from philanthropy? Where does the funding come from?
Well, we like to say we'll take every source of funding, including jewelry. We've gotten our anchor institution partners have contributed not only their business or buying our services like laundry services, but they're also contributing money because they know they can't leave the community. It's in their self-interest to have people employed and safer. The city government has provided federal funds like HUD 108 money, which is a 20-year loan that's a couple % interest. We've also found, interestingly, a number of people all over the country who left Ohio years ago. Ohio's a little bit like Ireland after the potato famine. Lots of people have dispersed. But we found people who want to give back and have made investments for a few %. They're impact investors investing in our companies. So it's a range, and we use new markets tax credits and many things. And Donna's my good friend, and we'll be coming to her for money soon.
So we're arranging a deal right now here. One other thing, so you mentioned the cooperative, and this is a very particular form that you have chosen. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about why you chose that form, as opposed to basically setting up an institution, hiring people to be providers without that cooperative ownership. And how does that ownership work?
Well, we chose a cooperative for 2 reasons. One, because we think that the businesses, if they're owned locally by the people who work in them, they'll be rooted in place. They'll be far less likely to leave our community. Imagine if we owned a company and we walked to work every day and we work there. We're not going to get together and say, I've got a great idea. Let's send our jobs to China. We're going to keep our jobs there locally. But second, because there aren't outside investors, the company is owned internally. As there are profits, they go into what are called capital accounts to build wealth for the workers. So our mantra has been, a job alone is not enough. Now, it's hard enough to create jobs in these neighborhoods, but if you're we pay a decent wage in the laundry. Our average wage is $15.50. It's an entry-level job, but it's hard to get ahead at that wage. And so we want to help people build wealth. So the companies are owned by the workers. They elect members to the board. They get to call some of the decisions. There's a clear management structure, so it's not a collective where everybody just sits around. And they're for-profit businesses, and so far, so good.
So I was really struck by this because I was saying to Ted years ago, almost 30 years ago now, there really was a tremendous interest in profit sharing, partial worker ownership, quality control circles in businesses. And the literature was overwhelming that the companies that had these kinds of arrangements where the workers had some stake in the profits or ownership were really higher productivity, better incentive companies. And it's remarkable how that form has not sort of lost traction. So I was just delighted. I'm delighted here through the year of the cooperative, and I think that in thinking about your organizations, I think it's just a fantastic model. So I wanted to get that in there. One other thing that you, in your, what I read, so a lot of times you think about training and you train workers for jobs, and then it turns out the jobs aren't there. And one of the things I got from reading the Evergreen analysis is that you really start with the organization and the job and the need, and then go out and find and train the workers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have what's called a workforce development industry in this country. I read one statistic that we're spending something like $37 billion a year on training people, and some of those people do get jobs. But we've hired people at Evergreen who went through 3 or 4 programs, being job trained for green jobs, for instance. They do all the right things. They go to all the courses. And at the end of that pipeline, there's no job.
No job.
And so we decided, let's create the companies first. Let's know we need 3 truck drivers at the laundry, 50 sheet folders, a bookkeeper, and then let's recruit people and train them into those existing jobs.
Great, thank you. So Lisa, Ted mentioned impact investing. This is an area that Calvert, under your leadership, is very involved in, and I know we talked behind stage about the way in which you find individual investors who want to be an impact investor and linking them to impact investment opportunities. So I thought we might start there with what Calvert is doing.
Absolutely, and I'm so excited to be here today. At Calvert Foundation, we really believe that we are part of a movement. And it's a movement that's about money, it's about values, it's about sustainability, it's about meaning. And the social needs in this country today are enormous. But there's something that each and every one of us here in this room can do to address those needs through our money. Finance and financial institutions have gotten a bad rap as of late. We believe that money can be a force for good, and that when individuals align their money with their values, the results are transformative, not just for the organizations and individuals that receive that investment, and we mean investment in the truest sense as a loan, but that investment is also transformative for the individual who provides the investment, because it changes your connection to a community that maybe traditionally has been underserved, traditionally has not had access to capital, but through your investment dollars can. So at Calvert Foundation, we have something called the Calvert Foundation Community Investment Note that makes it possible for you to invest directly in communities and have those dollars go to support affordable housing, to go to support small business owners, to support community facilities, to support the types of activities that Ted just talked about. We at Calvert Foundation really believe in economic justice and the opportunity for every individual in this country to participate in the economy. We have a saying that we like to use. It's not about the 99%. It's not about the 1%. It's about the 100%. And impact investing really is a way to expand the economy by including everyone and creating opportunities for people to lift themselves out of poverty. So Laura asked that we use an example, a real story, and I'd like to ask you to imagine for a moment. Imagine that you're a woman, not hard for many people in the room, will already be able to imagine that. Imagine that you're a woman and that you're a small business owner, and you own a company that's in a male-dominated manufacturing industry, part of the economy, and you've had tough times. You're based in California, you've been through an earthquake, you've had arson in the building next door to you that really wiped out your factory. And each time you've started over again. And each time you've worked hard to move your business forward. It's the story of a real woman. Her name is Jane Skeeter, and she owns a company named Ultra Glass. And she is a borrower that has benefited from investment dollars from individuals just like you through an initiative that we call Women Investing in Women. It's the Win-Win Initiative. We've heard that a lot here, but we really believe that it's possible to invest and have your dollars do good and do well, and to invest in individuals like Jane Skeeter, who's been able to borrow money when traditional mainstream financial institutions would not lend to her through this initiative.
So you have the challenge of identifying the investments, finding this woman, or finding, there are many other examples of this. How do you find the investment opportunities? And then how do you measure, because a lot of what an impact investment is often an investment which has a financial return, but might have a green return, might have a community development return and training. How do you identify the business and how do you measure the success? So I'm an investor, I want to put $20 into your fund. How do I know you're finding the right investment for me?
How do you know we're good stewards of your money?
Yes. I think there's a very important matching of the funder with the fundee.
Absolutely. And we're interested in connecting investors with communities that they care about. And we do think of ourselves as stewards of capital. We identify organizations that benefit from investment dollars through networks like community development financial institutions. Okay. And many of our borrowers are CDFIs. They're based in every part of the country, and we lend to more than 60 of them in the United States. We also have a very rigorous due diligence process. One of the benefits of having been doing this for a while, we like to say that we've been doing impact investing since before they called it that. Mm-hmm. We're on our 16th year, and we have really put in place quite rigorous frameworks and origination methods to identify sound investment opportunities that have had a loan loss of less than 2%, which we think stands up to any financial institution record.
Absolutely.
And we measure social impact using some of the industry standards so that people can compare apples to apples. Mm-hmm. There are programs like GEARS, which is the Global Impact Investing Rating Service, that allows you to run your investments through a standard set of metrics and generate a score that can be compared with other impact investment opportunities, and we participate actively in the GEARS program.
Great, that's fantastic, thank you. So let's move on to Jim, and Jim is doing this in a different way. I want to start out with the point that he is one of the stories of a small... I told him he should have it for everybody, but he said it was too early. He thought we would misbehave. So Jim is one of these stories of a person who went through the small business route, the IPO route. It worked. It took a lot of time, but is now gotten very involved in microloans. in working with his own very successful company to invest in small-scale suppliers, using a partnership with Axion to do that. So he understands small business financing both in the very traditional way, but in the microfinance, small business way we're talking about here. So share some of your experiences with us or examples, Jim.
Well, thank you.
And share some of your beer later.
Yeah, I thought I was invited just to bring the beer, but
I was an early adopter of that
talk.
beer. I want to say, I'm proud to say I was an early adopter.
No wonder you look so happy. I think I was invited to talk about a program that we started about 4 years ago called Brewing the American Dream. And it kind of came out of my experiences starting Sam Adams. I started Sam Adams in my kitchen 28 years ago. And when I look back, there were a couple of things that would have been really nice to have, but just weren't available. And the two that we focused on were, access to small-scale loans and nuts and bolts business advice from people who really knew what they were doing. Because, when I started Sam Adams, I should have known something about business. I had 3 degrees from Harvard, a JD, an MBA, but I really didn't know about all the basic stuff that you need in a small business. Just simple stuff like, how do you do a sales call? How do you design a label? How do you hire people? How do you fire people? Et cetera, et cetera. So when we thought about philanthropic activity, I was not a big fan of a lot of sort of standard corporate philanthropic activities. They're generally big companies. We're a small company, much more entrepreneurial. So we decided, let's do something innovative. Let's use what we have to bring to the party, which is creativity, entrepreneurship, and let's approach a philanthropic activity the way we would approach any new business venture. Let's make sure it adds value. Let's make sure it grows out of the ethos and culture of the company. Let's make sure it's a good deal for the company, that just business-wise, we benefit from it more than the money we put into it, because if we do, we're going to want to do a lot of it. And, we approached it like we would a new venture. We didn't know what we were doing. We actually hired an outside firm, Cause Consulting, that's expert in there. I think Mark Feldman's here. And they helped us think about this, structure it, as we would any business venture. And then they introduced us to Axion as a partner, because we began to focus on this idea of there's a loan gap. The SBA makes loans, banks make loans, but below $50,000, $25,000, there are no loans for little businesses. So that's our niche. Is the sweet spot is sort of $5,000 to $10,000 loans. We've done 150 of them. We went through the first million. We put another $1 million into the program, rolled it out nationally. The repayment rate isn't as good as Lisa's. It's about 97%. But for loans that nobody else would make, and the reason that it's so high is the second component, which is the engagement of the company in it through coaching, mentoring programs. The thing we did last night, which we created, it's called speed coaching. It's like speed dating. We bring in experts in all these different areas that food, beverage, and hospitality companies, and that's who we lend to, because that's who we know. We don't know anything else. We know food, beverage, and hospitality, and we bring in experts in the areas that they need to know things, and the businesses spend 20 minutes with each of the speed coaches, and it's amazing how much value you can add to a little business in 20 minutes of your area of expertise. And it's really fun. The benefit to the company is, we're small. Last year, we finally got to 1% of the beer market. It took me 28 years to get from like invisible to infinitesimal to tiny. We made it to small. And so we have to stay nimble and entrepreneurial. And all of this contact with all these passionate entrepreneurs keeps our company energized. So that's the benefit we get.
So it's a fantastic story. And by the way, you may be small, but I think you pretty much launched the craft beer market again in the United States. So you've created a whole new industry in what was an extremely concentrated market before. So you would presumably, there's a way in which we're linked back, CDFI through Accion might get to this activity, right?
6 degrees of separation.
Right.
Because Accion is a CDFI, and they do, again, tremendous micro-lending. But, Laura, when you look at, I think, even that umbrella, the CDFIs that come under that umbrella called community development financial institutions, you have micro-enterprises, you have folks like Lisa, who's leading Calvert, you've got loan funds, you've got community development banks and credit unions and venture capital funds. And I say they all fill that breach.
They all fill
fill that gap that a lot of people simply won't do or can't do in providing that kind of capital and credit.
So I would, just to put this in international perspective across time and space, this gap exists in all economies. Correct. So the issue of how you fund small and then micro, even more, enterprise is a persistent issue across countries. The U.S., I think, already we have a very strong and still with many holes, operation in the country to fund small businesses. But all of these innovations, we're moving so fast to fill the gap. It's really very, very impressive. The other thing I want to say, just to put it in international perspective, is these very low default rates or very high success rates are a characteristic of microloans around the world. It's really very interesting. It's very hard to find the enterprise or the person to whom to lend. But if you find them, they end up being very reliable because they've gone through the process of being identified. Often there are other support systems in place. It's not a high-risk investment. But I brought that up because we got a couple questions via Twitter, one from Rory, one from Decio, that really focus on, two things. One is we haven't talked about equity financing at all. And two, what happens if something goes wrong? So what happens if you have a business, you start a business, the business looks like it has an anchor buyer, and all of a sudden the contract is canceled. So I think we should talk a little bit about those two issues, which we haven't talked about. What do you do if one of your lines of business, I think Ted and Jim may be here, what happens to a company in that case?
Well, we're still at very early days, so thankfully we're adding customers rather than losing clients. But, obviously we don't want to hitch the future of an entire company on one client. So our laundry, for instance, I think as of last week, has 23 institutional customers that we're working with, 23. So that we can withstand some of those changes.
Okay.
So that's one answer. The other thing is that we in Cleveland have created a holding company inside of which all these different businesses exist.
Okay.
And that the holding company can help support companies if they get in difficulty to keep the entire enterprise moving forward.
Okay. All right. Do you have any examples of where the contract is being closed down and you want to help the business move on?
Well, sometimes you do fund a business that, is doing a bad job. Mm-hmm. And our experience has been, again, because they're in our space.
They're in your space.
We can provide them assistance to stop doing a bad job.
Okay.
Because generally we funded it because the idea was good. Yep. And then they're just screwing it up. And you can go in there and help them stop screwing it up.
So instead of speed coaching, you do a little more in-depth coaching.
Yeah, it's an intervention.
All right. So what about this issue of a couple of the questions, including from Twitter from Trelstad, raise the issue of equity capital? So I think I don't know, Lisa, do you do any investments in the equity space, or are you thinking of possibly that space in the future? And I want to link this also. I know it's an indirect link, but I know we were asked to talk a little bit about this concept of a B corporation, which might be an equity investment. So speak a little bit about equity funding in this area.
So equity funding, we think, is a very important need, financial need for the types of organizations that we want to benefit. At Calvert Foundation, we're focused primarily on making loans,
right.
And it is because we raise money from individuals, so we want to make sure that they get a return of that capital, that they actually get their money back. But there is also a role for the private sector and private individuals to step into a gap around equity. And I think, one of the things that we've observed over the 16 years, people really want to do good things with their money. Right? They want to make investments where they get their money back, and it also has a positive social return. And there's a bunch of need on the other side of the equation. And what's missing in the middle is this infrastructure that makes it possible for individuals to invest in these communities. And there's a real need on the private equity side for more institutions and organizations to serve that missing middle. We think that the CDFI fund and other parts of the administration can be helpful in that arena to provide the support and leverage that private equity institutions need. But we also are very excited at Calvert Foundation about the passage of the Jobs Act, which had a crowdfunding component. And we think that crowdfunding and the ability to raise equity capital in very small amounts, potentially online, is going to be transformative, and that will give people opportunity to participate in impact investing with equity in addition to the debt products that are already out there.
Jim? My perspective on it's probably different. With businesses that we loan to, we want them to go out and find their own equity. We want them to have to borrow from their family, from their friends, because then their ass is on the line. And then we'll lend to them. But we don't want them to, not suffer if their business fails.
So does that mean for the ones that for your partners, the partnership here would be a firm that comes to you, a small business, where there is an equity stake of a group of owners, maybe it's friends and family, and they come to you and say, we want a loan, and we want to work in your supply chain with your support. But one of the ways you would assess a possible investment would be the extent to which there's equity participation from the firm?
These are very few of our loan recipients are in our supply chain. I mean,
okay.
We buy coffee from Lucy.
Okay,
Galena,
so your supply chain
here,
is more the chain to the hotels and the
yeah. And these are we're talking about very small businesses. This
right.
is like, a Puerto Rican bakery that needs a $5,000 loan to put in counters and tables and chairs so that they can be a restaurant.
Okay.
It's that kind of thing.
Okay, all right. Are we doing, Donna, what about in your world of the CDFI institutions? Do many of them engage in equity financing with their borrowers?
Some do, and again, they are then either doing some sort of equity investments or financing of that equity. Typically, what you're finding with CDFIs as well, and I think that really is the business model for CDFIs, is that they're also recycling that money within the community as well, and that can be through a variety of different venues in which they do that.
I see.
And that's a fantastic business model, because that means the money stays in the community. Absolutely.
Yes, right. The community basis here is obviously a very important theme. Yes.
And you also asked me about ForBenefit Corporations.
Yes, ForBenefit, or otherwise known as B. Yes.
Yes, B Corps, which are a new form of corporation which uses business to address and to try to solve social and environmental problems. And B Corps are a really exciting development that is a different type of corporation. It's a for-benefit corporation that holds itself to a different standard around meeting shareholder interests, and really is holding itself to environmental and social standards in its corporate governance, in its corporate structure. But what's exciting is it's a way to address social needs using a business model that's not a nonprofit, that is actually a for-profit corporation. So, I think that as we look at the needs for capital in the sector in impact investing, that traditionally a lot of the needs have been served by nonprofits, but now there's more and more opportunity for for-profit corporations to step in through B Corp structures to really address these needs.
So I think that's a great way to end the panel with the observation that what's happening in all of these examples is we're finding ways to provide some initial funding which sets something up which is going to be sustainable. It's going to generate business opportunities which generate a return. It might go into a profit share or a cooperative. It might go back to an investment in building 2 restaurants rather than 1. But you might start with philanthropic money. You might start with an initial grant from the government, but that is not what's going to sustain you. And that's why this is about sustainable finance, and I think we've heard in a variety of different ways how you can sustain. These are all great innovators and entrepreneurs, and thank you very much. We've hit our ending time, and it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.